Oh, tonight we were lucky. We had a guy that we knew from Camp Thunder, Mack Culverhouse, who ran the programs down there and grew up in the local area with a great scoutmaster. And we talked about a scout is obedient, and you'll hear me talk about it where it says he obeys his parents, scoutmaster, patrol leader, and all other duly constituted authorities. That was the scout law, the seventh scout law. And that's what we discussed that, but we talked on a lot of other subjects. Hope you enjoy this podcast.
Thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mack Culverhouse.
Hey, this is Walker Chandler and Elliott Coker, and we have as a guest tonight Mack Culverhouse. Mack's a performer, professional scouter, and he's going to talk. We're going to talk tonight about the theme. Basically, we're going to talk about a lot of things, but a scout is obedient. I always had a problem with that when I was a scout when we learned that because I always thought the that I didn't want to be obedient to everything I was told, but that's probably just part of being a kid. Mac, tell us about your scouting background.
Sure. Eagle Scout from Troop 25, Thomaston, Georgia. Joined the movement in fifth grade with my best friend. He was my scoutmaster's son. Did all the scouting things up through high school, eagled 03, 04, somewhere in there. Did Philmont, did the OA for a little bit. Started working at Camp Thunder at summer camp in 2005. I was a buckskin instructor and loved it. Just I liked going to camp pretty much as a kid. Realized I liked working at scout camp. I was blessed that I didn't have to work as a teenager. So every summer, that's what I did throughout college. Minus some time that I missed a couple of summers for the Army. And then in 2012, yes, 2012, I went to work for the council full time. After summer camp ended, the professional at the time was leaving, and they asked me to stay on. And what was funny was it was sort of a part time, kind of full time. Hey, you can stay at camp. You'll run some of the weekend stuff. We'll pay you your summer camp salary, no benefits. And I kept doing that until 2013 when they made me, that's when they gave me a cubicle in the council office. Wasn't as nice as my office at camp, but that was when I became an official big boy employee of the council. And I stayed in that role until 2017 as I think the business card said program specialist, but I was the camp director at Thunder.
Well, we were going to talk about obedient. A scout is obedient, and that we're not confined to that. But you were in the Army. Tell me about your service in the Army.
Very undistinguished. It was very popular in my high school, where I grew up, for us to join the Guard, and that pivoted to ROTC. A couple of years active from that, and I was a victim of the Obama era drawdown.
Well, where did you serve abroad at all?
I did twice. Nothing. Uh, Again, nothing distinguished there. Uh, Going back to our theme of obedience, I went where I was told and served where I was told to serve, and I was blessed to do it under difficult circumstances.
Did you have what kind of rank did you have when you were in the service?
Uh, I got out as a staff sergeant.
Well, I remember that an Eagle, if a person has Eagle Scout, they automatically become an E2 or an E3, I believe, isn't it?
Okay, so for me it was E3, and that was the Army. And I know the Air Force still does it for E3, but I had heard, and don't quote me on this, that the Marine Corps and the Army had gone to, as scouting has grown, which is a good thing, that they were getting so many guys in as Eagle Scouts that they had reduced it back to E2.
I see. Okay.
But don't, and I want to say that was just the Army and Marine Corps, and there's an interesting sociological aspect of that there, that guys that like hunting and camping and fishing gravitate to the branches that go forth into the woods and kill people and break things versus the technical branches. So that they would have some rank inflation there.
Yeah, I
But
see.
at the time, it was E3, which for the Army is private first class. I think the Marine Corps calls it Lance Corporal or something silly. But that was, and that was also a product of recruitment during the worst part of the global war on terrorism too. I know that was definitely hey, you get E3 pay all through basic. So that was a big thing.
Well, tell me something when if we're talking about, a scout is obedient, he uh, uh, follows the orders of the duly constituted authorities. When you were running camp as the program director, did you have problems with obedience problems with your staff, or were they really cooperative just because of the nature of scouting?
Uh, the obedience problems I had with my staff were in the comparative scheme of dealing with 15 to 17-year-olds, which were the bulk of my kids, were very minor. I had problems from an obedience standpoint every day. Formation 0700. All right, well, here comes Johnny Tenderfoot showing up at 0705. Yeah. Uh, wear scout shorts with the shirt tucked in. Oh, Mr. Mack, they're uncomfortable. They're too hot. Okay, that's the uniform rule. But as far as giving instructions of, hey, you will teach first aid at this block from 0900 to 950, and then emergency preparedness from 10 to 1050. No issues there, and God forbid a couple of more sticky situations that we had. Had to land a helicopter at the waterfront one time. Kind of scary. That kind of scary. No issues with the. I need you to go to this campsite and do this right the hell now. I will broker no dissent. Absolutely no issues in that regards. And that is 100%, I believe, the quality of kids that scouting produces.
That's a great thing to hear, and I think that all around the world, I think people understand that it's kind of a different sort of kid that's in scouting these days. That is to say, it's a sort of a minority, but I think it's a high class minority of the children out there.
Yes, sir. If I may, I have a hilarious anecdote I like to share about one of my camp kids, one of my camp staffers, uh, who also joined the military later. Uh, and he enlisted and he became a combat engineer. He was in the Army as well. And one of the things combat engineers do is they, in Iraq, we were confined to major highways just for various different reasons and whatnot. But the Fedayeen or Fedayeen Saddam, Al Qaeda in Iraq, whatever they're calling themselves this week, they knew that. They knew that. And they would prepare improvised explosive devices along the road. You don't fight the American Army in the field, you fight them where you can. And so our combat engineers had what we called route clearance platoons, and they would go out there in funky looking bulldozers and trucks with inverted V holes that were mine resistant to clear the path. And one of my guys called me. His unit was going to Iraq, and he called me before he was leaving, and he said, "Mr. Mack, I wanted you to know that they asked for volunteers for the route clearance platoon, and I stuck my hand up." And I was kind of flabbergasted. And I was like, dude, what the hell? That is literally the most dangerous job, like in post-occupation Iraq, post-surge Iraq that you could do. And he goes, yeah, but you always said, if not me, who? If not now, when? And y'all, I about flipped my lid because this is the same kid. I said that like one time at a Scoutmaster Minute thing on Sunday afternoon before we started. And I don't know, it came off of one of my little pamphlets from camp school. I said that like one time. And this is the same kid that I told repeatedly. I think I might even let him go early one summer for boy cabins, girl cabins do not mix. Nobody dies, nobody gets pregnant, one doesn't offset the other. And I must have had to tell him that a dozen times over the course of the summer. And that didn't stick, but the if not me, who, if not now, when, stuck. And that was, I was always proud of that. That made me feel like if I didn't do anything else in scouting, at least I did that.
Could you share with me that staff member's initials?
JS.
Wow.
Yes, that one.
The
Rock on, JS.
that's great. I think about that in life in terms of life saving, and how a scout, somebody, you're on the side of a lake, you don't know who those people out there are who are in trouble, but you have the training. I hope you have the training to at least attempt, without great risk of your own life. You have you can go get them. They aren't your people. You don't know them, but a scout goes. And so that there seems to be an analogy there between that guy says, if who, if I don't do it, who will do it? And that's, scout is brave. That, remember that he says he faces danger in spite of fear. He's not fearless, but he faces danger in spite of fear.
Yes.
We've already crossed some bridges from the military and scouting, but I wanted to ask, how did your time in scouting affect your
Hold on
time?
one second.
Sure, no problem.
Sorry.
There. Oh my gosh. And
Say that again, Elliott. I didn't hear you, buddy.
I was asking, how did your time in scouting influence your time in the military? Did it make it easy? I know you said it was popular in your high school, which is also another factor why you joined, but did it make your time in the military easier, though scouting is not a military outfit?
Yes. I have two real stories with that. So getting off the bus, fell in the Smoky Bear hats, all angry and yelling at us. And he goes, I want all my Eagle Scouts to raise their hands. It's okay. I just kind of stick my hand up, kind of stupid. And there are four of us in my training platoon. And he goes, you, and you, pointing at the other three, are squad leaders. You tall fella there, and he did say fella, you're the guide on bear. And I carried the little flag around. In the John Wayne movies, I'm the one that gets shot first. But that was such for whatever reason, they just enjoyed that, or I enjoyed that, and that was, I got to have a quasi leadership position right off the bat. Guys turned to me for advice, and I knew how to take care of my feet. There you go. If you didn't learn anything else in scouting, I knew how to take care of my feet. So I could help guys do that. That was just such one of those little things there that was totally a scouting thing. I knew how to take care of my feet, and bam, there you go. And that's how Mack becomes that Mr. Walker, you never really saw it, I don't think, that much, and Elliott lived it every day. I have this very abrasive, loud, in-your-face command style, and that's kind of where it started.
I think now might be a good time to mention the reason I know Mac is because he was my first official boss in any capacity when I worked at summer camp staff for my first time. My first year, I believe, was winter camp 2013. I think that might have been the first time on my first time on the scene, and then I had a summer camp just following after that in 14, which was biggest change of my whole. It was great.
Good.
What was tell me? People all around. I'm hoping there'll be lots of people will tune into this sooner or later, and tell me about both of you guys. Talk about what you would tell parents who have a 10-year-old, 11-year-old who's becoming a scout, getting to go to scout camp, and why should they go to the trouble of having their kid in scouts, and what can they expect from him going to scout camp?
I'll go first. Um, the why you'd want to go to scout, why you'd want to send your child to scout camp. I
Yeah,
think
in other words,
if you
they're gonna
want,
have to pay money. They're gonna have to,
yeah,
and it's probably less than most camps, summer camps anywhere in the country, but still, it's money.
I'll be
And
28 next week. I'm almost 30 years old. I'm getting close to it. And anytime someone asks me about something from my childhood, almost every time, unless they ask me about some trauma, like specifically, if they ask me about good times that I had when I was a kid, just about every time Camp Thunder enters that vocabulary. And that's from when I was 6 years old all the way to when I was 20 something. My last time doing camp, I worked camp staff last winter just because I wanted to, and my kids were involved, and I decided I want to go do camp again just because I can. So if you want to have your kids head filled up with all the best memories that they're going to have, send them to scout camp. It's okay. Your turn, Mac.
So Elliott hit on some good points there. I mentioned that I joined Scouts with my best friend, who happened to be my Scoutmaster's son. Uh, I've known. Let's see, I'm 30. Elliott, you're about to be 28, right?
Mm-hmm. I'll
Okay.
be 28 next week.
Yeah. So I'll be 38 this year. I've known Thomas 37 of those years, uh, and I still talk to him today, to this day, rather.
Mm-hmm.
So that is part of it. But as far as what I would tell a parent, what I would tell a parent today is scout camp is where your child can experience failure and tribulation in a controlled environment and move forward from it.
Yes. Fun with a purpose. That's a fun saying that we all say in scouting is fun with a purpose, a game with a purpose,
And,
and a safe place to fail.
yeah, uh, that was my embarrassing story is I was utterly miserable my first week at summer camp. That my 10-year-old Mac did not care for camp at all. It was hot. I missed my mom. I didn't have the right shoes. I had never worn scout shorts before, and they were itchy. My classes were boring, and we had swimming first thing in the morning, and it was really cold. So I went from cold and wet to hot and wet all day, and it was just really, really miserable. Uh, and then the next summer we went there, I found myself in charge of the random winter crossovers because we didn't have a feeder pack. So here I am, slightly more confident in myself as a scout, and I've got 5 or 6 brand new. Like, I don't even think they got the scout rank shown on their shirt yet, guys. And Mr. Luke's like, Mac, you've been cranking merit badges pretty good. I want you to ride herd on these kids, make sure they get where they're going. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's what I do now. And just that change was utterly baffling.
well, that's one of the things that scouting offers is, to me, one of the many things I think parents need to understand is that their children need opportunities to practice leadership, whether it be assistant patrol leader, or like you were at camp, or these. But the children themselves need that opportunity. And I remember scout camp. One of the things I liked about it was just having free time, so that I, at 11 years old, could go where I wanted to go and go to the trading post and walk with a friend or be by myself or
Mm.
whatever. And I think that's something that a lot of kids uh, they get tired of their parents riding herd on them all the time and
It's
always telling them what to do, and then they're going from one thing to the next, and the parents, and so I think that's
affording them
control. Yeah.
affording them the responsibility of freedom.
Yes, there we
Yeah.
go.
That's what you're doing when you send them to summer camp.
And even down the road, if you want to send your child to staff a summer camp, that was something that was baffling to me. Elliot, I think it was 2013. You might not have been there yet, but
Mm.
we
So
had we had secured for the staff's night out, and I'm sitting in my office. Uh, I'd like to say I was diligently working late, but no, I'm waiting for my girlfriend to come pick me up. Uh, and one of my kids, one of the first year guys, pokes his head in his office and he's like, "Mr. Mack, what are we supposed to do?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're off. I don't care. Just be at morning formation." And just that utter look of, I'm 15 years old. I've never not had a rigidly planned 10, 11 hours to myself ever. I don't know what to do. Uh, was a little worried about that, honestly. It was more information there, no worries. Uh, but just that look of, and also I was slightly aggravated because I'm like, dude, school's out. I'm off.
hey,
Uh,
listen, I'm off too, buddy. Get out of my office.
yeah, like, leave. Why are you still here? Uh, but just his sheer, that look on his face when he was confronted with the freedom of choice for something, I guess for the first time ever, uh, just was, it's funny, but it's also, uh, yeah,
well,
that is definitely a something I remember a lot from Scouts.
well, I always think too, even a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, uh, I have some grandchildren, and I really respect the fact that a 3 and 4-year-old and 5-year-old, they're learning things all the time. They take it pretty darn seriously. It may look like they're playing, but but just taking the time to look at a stream and look at the rocks and look at the little animals that live there and look at the little things in the grass, that is, I think, an awfully good practice for anybody of any age, but especially a child. Nature study is fundamental, and it's a fundamental part of scouting, really. That I think that it takes some time, though, to enjoy nature, some time to sit back and actually watch the birds and listen to things and essentially almost become a part of the nature rather than just be a outside observer where it's going by the window of your car.
I want to ask both of you, since we're loosely talking about obedience, is there a time in scouting or outside of scouting when your lack of obedience affected you very negatively and immediately that you can think of?
Uh, I like to drive fast. So that there we go on that. And in college, it was a long walk from my fraternity house to the pool, and I decided I needed an adult beverage for that walk. And the local constabulary took great offense to that. Uh, and that was an immediate, oh dear, followed by, I think the municipal fine was like $125. And to a somewhat broke college kid, that was just, ooh,
Devastating.
devastating. Like, oh, uh, so yes, those that is my lack of obedience. I like to drive fast, and open container laws are victimless crimes.
Well, they're victimless crimes, but obviously, well, I'm a lawyer, and I see it from the standpoint of people in the General Assembly and people trying to enforce the DUI laws, and so they end up pulling over some drunk driver, and he's got you know half empty cans in the back seat and all that. And so, it's, I can understand it, but I've noticed that one of the downsides of those open container laws is that people tend to throw those cans out of the window of the car and litter. And that's really a shame. But it's one of those unintended consequences of
Yes, sir.
the government making a law.
And full disclosure, now actually, I'm in law enforcement, which is hilarious considering uh, my youth. Uh, and I've never an open container on foot is totally different than somebody with a 6 or a Miller Lite burning down I-85 without a driver's license and his lights off. But uh,
what what are you doing in law enforcement these days, Mac?
so I was a deputy for Coweta County, and
Yep.
then my wife got promoted, and we moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Go Jags! And hopefully, uh, I should start with JSO in January, and I'll be a patrolman for them as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it sounds interesting and dangerous at the same time.
It is it is a the most fun. Every day is the most fun you never want to have again.
Oh, well, I can imagine a lot of things. I have a nephew who was an EMT, and it basically kind of drove him to drink all the kind of sad situations all the wrecks and things like that. It was pretty sad. But I assume you run into stuff like that, or you have as a deputy.
Yes, sir. And it is it tied us back to scouting. A scout is helpful. So I tell myself that as long as I can do as much as I can for as long as I can and make a difference in that one person, if at least one person that I interacted with on a 12-hour shift, if I made their day better, then I did my job. I can go home. Like when I was on night shift, I like to go home, have a beer or two, and grill a steak at 8 in the morning while my normal neighbors were going to work. That was a very enjoyable moment for me. That was
It's funny.
The I remember I saw a Chris Rock cartoon. I mean not cartoon, a little thing that he did about how not to get your ass beaten by the police. Have you ever seen that one, Mac?
no, sir, but I do enjoy Chris Rock, so
Well,
I can imagine.
well, he says it's a public. He's wearing a suit, and he says this is a public service announcement, and he says so. I have some rules to keep you from getting your ass beaten by the police. And so, rule number one is obey the law, and it would have it printed up there. That's what Elliott and I ought to have is this printed: obey the law. And he says, think of it as a suggestion. And then they have a little vignette of some guy like jumping over a turnstile, not paying for it, and he's got a gun and he's holding a joint, and then the police are beating on him, So, and then he had a whole bunch of other suggestions. It's really good. They ought to show it to people that are in jail for the first time.
Think of it as a suggestion.
Yeah, think of it. Obey the law.
Well, it fits our theme. It is obedience. I'll tell you my little quick story that happened to me last week. What I did was not obey a set of rules that we have at work last week. And this week, I'm sorry, I'm speaking for last week, so it was really the week prior. That's how long ago it was. I didn't follow the little rule of double check the serial numbers on this equipment and take down each customer's phone number whenever you don't just assume that because they're wearing that company shirt that they're there for that company. Sometimes they're there for their own personal items in my line of work. That guy came in, he was wearing a particular company shirt, so I retrieved before he even got to my desk because I was thinking I'm being ahead of everything. I'm going to go grab this his company's equipment. So I pulled it up to the desk. He's there. I type in the company's name instead of asking him for the phone number, and then he does pay the repair bill for these two pieces of equipment and takes them. And later on that same day, another customer came in who I followed the instructions for and promptly informed him, "We don't have any equipment here for you. It looks like somebody already picked it up." So because I neglected to obey the few simple rules that we have, I gave somebody's blowers away, and we had to supply them with fresh, brand new. The person whom they belonged to was then supplied with two fresh, brand new blowers, courtesy of me and my company's money.
Elliot, that sounds like a textbook case of theft by deception.
Uh,
Uh,
well, it does sound that way, but the guy's name here, I'll just tell you, and he's not going to mind because he's got new blowers. Um, the guy's name is Jairo Perez, and Jairo has a company called JP Lawn Care, and he came in. Or the other guy's name's Jose Perez,
oh,
and his company's called JP Lawn Service. So one of them does business under their name, and the other one does business under JP Lawn Care. I didn't think about these things. So no, it wasn't he wasn't trying to steal from me, and he's got more than one blower, so he thought, I guess I must have brought two blowers in instead of just I guess I did. I'm sorry if I just forgot. And I was like, "Yeah, you got it. These are definitely yours. Go ahead and take them there."
well,
So,
well, I remember when I was a scout, we had to memorize the whole little paragraph. That was kind of a more thorough paragraph back in the 50s
mhm,
than it became later when they tried to dumb down everything about the scout law. And they said, like a scout is trustworthy, and we had to memorize word for word a
mhm.
paragraph saying what that was. And then it got so dumbed down by the some point in time that it was like, scout is trustworthy. Oh, he can be trusted. You know, that's like, but at any rate, on obedience, they said that he obeys his parents, his scoutmaster, and all other duly constituted authorities. Well, I always had a problem with that duly constituted authorities, especially when I didn't vote for it. So you had certain laws that you grow up, and I didn't vote for that, and I'm supposed to obey that. They were duly constituted by people who didn't know what they were doing back in the 1930s or something like that. And so, I that was the only part of the scout law that I had problems with. Uh, Everything else, but that one was a kind of a sticking point, since, of course, now we all, as we are adults, we understand that, for example, you have a drinking age, where you just say, for whatever reason, you know, we're going to have the drinking age be 21. And then you start thinking, adults, when they get to be 30, could decide that a lot of people in their 20s abuse alcohol. So they could just, since they're the majority of the voters, they could just raise the drinking age to 31 or something like that. And so is that fair to the 25-year-old? When I was a kid, the drinking age in Georgia was 18, and they had made it that way because in World War II, you had, you had all these guys that would risk their lives, and how can you tell a guy like that he can't have a beer? So, anyway, that's my little. I
Welcome
won't.
to the
I won't make any.
Libertarian Party.
I won't make any confessions of any laws I might have broken through the years, uh, but
yeah.
that's an issue with the obedience problem, I think.
Mhm.
Uh, or we want to talk about laws instituted by people that know nothing of the subject in the 30s. The 1934 National Firearms Act
Oh,
comes to mind, and I can go on ad nauseum about how that was classist, statist, kind of racist, not really. Local laws already had the racist roots of gun control covered. I could that'd be 3 hours worth of angry man shouts at cloud. The 1934 National Firearms Act, and just yes.
well, you remember there was a Supreme Court case that went up. It was called the Miller case,
Actually,
where
God, he wasn't there.
I know, and it wasn't well argued by his people, and so that Elliot, that's the one where the Supreme Court upheld a ban of machine gun ownership. Now, nowadays you can have a machine gun if it's registered. I believe that ATF registration stuff still goes on.
It does, but in '86 they closed the registry. So there is only a finite supply of fully transferable machine guns that you or I could just go out and buy as a private citizen. The anti-gun movement hated the Firearms Owner Protection Act, and they thought it was going to kill it. They stuck a line item in there called the Hughes Amendment that closed the federal registry for machine guns because it was a tax. The NFA was upheld as a tax, uh, and when you paid the tax on your machine gun, it got stuck on a registry. And in '86, they closed the registry. So a AR-15 with a selector in it, it should be $800. I think Colt sells them to the DoD for like $450. You can go to Academy and buy Colt AR-15 semi-auto, $800-900. With that selector switch in it, they're $25,000 today.
What?
Yes, sir.
Well, that sounds like a invitation to a black market machine shop.
Oh yeah. Oh, it is, and we won't even talk about the constructive possession. The ATF charged a fella, I think it was in Indiana, in '92 or '93, because he had an AR-15 in the drill press, and they tried to hit him with constructive possession. Uh, it actually. It was later thrown out from a different Supreme Court case. Thompson Center, well, U.S. government versus Thompson Center rendered constructive possession mute on that. But yes, it's rampant abuse for the fully automatic weapons, and yeah, it's totally beyond the scope of this. And we want to talk about obedience, and especially just carrying bad. It's
Yeah.
really, ooh.
Well, Mac, you know what I'm thinking about is, we at this point, this is only episode 14, isn't that right, Elliot?
That's correct, sir.
So we don't have a big viewership, but Mac, we're thinking about how that people around the world will tune in and all. And boy, around the world, people are shocked by American the right to bear arms here. Now, I might have. Did you go? You didn't weren't involved in the 2019 World Jamboree up in West Virginia, were you?
I was not. I had left the movement then. I was, coincidentally enough, I was selling guns then.
Well, I went up to there as I went up and was on their little Brown Sea Island as one of the two guys being Baden Powell, and up there at the Bechtel Reserve, you had like 35,000 scouts from all over the world, and they had for the first time ever shooting sports at a World Jamboree, and they have a hell of a nice rifle range up there. It's kind of a ravine where you have a sheltered rifle places, where you can rest the rifle and scopes, and then you're shooting across the ravine at about, I'd say, 150 yards or 100 yards to the targets on the other side. And every kid at that jamboree wanted to shoot guns, and they were using they had 9mm pistols, they had shotguns and skeet, they had 308s, and they had I guess AR-15s. But I mean they and black powder, and so it's amazing. And all those kids, we had about 450 people, adults on the staff, were kind of the NRA types, but they didn't have their NRA patches all over them, but they were scouters. And they, some of the contingents didn't want their officially didn't want their kids to come over there. I think Sweden was one of them, but the people didn't turn them away. If they showed up, they didn't ask them, does your contingent allow you to touch a gun? And scouts of all people around the world, they're the ones that need to practice guns and know guns. Everybody needs to understand guns, I think.
The Polish Boy Scouts. We had a Polish scout who was our international scout at camp one time. They are very militaristic, and I had a semi-auto AK in my personal quarters at camp, and Petor, of course, shortened to Pete, picked that up one night and was like, AK, very good. We have these for Russia. I was, okay. You're cool, Pete. uh, for the international scouter on camp staff, it sort of, I had some negative experiences with it. You know, paying this guy $300 a week, had to do all the State Department visa stuff for sometimes less than optimal return. But Pete was cool.
Pete was cool. He helped me at the Buckskin Pavilion. That was the summer of 2014. I remember that very well.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Boron. That was his
Yes.
name. Mm-hmm.
One thing, Mac, one thing that Baden Powell, when he's down at scout camp and he's talking to those kids, he says to them, he says, look, you know, what we're doing here is very serious business. He says, like, for example, marksmanship. That's not about just getting a badge and shooting a few little things. It's like you might have to defend yourself someday, or your country, or your family. And you need to be able to hit what you're shooting at. And you also need to know, I mean, I think children need to know enough about guns so that if they're at a friend's house and the friend pulls out a gun, they know what to do. They know how to be safe, or at least to get the hell out of there.
Yes, sir.
I had a friend in Scouts who was showing his family, I mean, showing his friends one day, his father's pistol, and then he shot himself in the leg, almost killed himself.
Mm.
And he was a scout. I mean, he was also an idiot. But
well, or
but,
work for the Scouts. You'll meet plenty of idiots. One of my personal Mac, not Scout Mac, I've always believed, and this has been my mantra forever: armed gays don't get bashed, and armed Jews don't get put into boxcars. And that is why I'm always have been, always will be a Second Amendment absolutist.
Yeah, but have you ever read Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion in the McDonald gun case?
Yes. Off camera here is the Mack Culverhouse Firearms Law Library. And I have yes, I was very active with the FPC all the way up until the Bruin decision.
Remind me what the Bruin decision was.
The Bruin decision, it did a couple of things. It said that Second Amendment cases did not have to pass strict scrutiny, and the inferior courts needed to be reminded of the 14th Amendment and how it applies to all the states in regards to not just voting, but the Second Amendment. And it had a technical aspect that eludes me at this point in time. Forget exactly who Bruin was. Oh, Bruin lived in New York. I can't remember. But it was pushing the onus of proof for firearms legislation back. That it had to meet the strict scrutiny, and it had to. The other one was the historical context. You had to show a historical context for any firearms law to pass constitutional muster.
One of those, and I don't think it was the McDonald case. The McDonald case has this Thomas wrote about 50 pages that every high school student ought to read, because he talked to, he says all this BS about that it's only the Second Amendment is designed only to protect state militias. He said, well, wait a minute. Remember the 1880s, 1890s, how the freed slaves were disarmed and then attacked by state militias in the South. And so and another great thing that Thomas wrote is he said and it might have been the Bruin case. He said, we don't even have to think about the Second Amendment. All we got to think about is the 14th Amendment that guarantees people the privileges and immunities. And, and the privileges and immunities include the right to self-defense, of course.
Yes, sir.
And
yes.
yeah.
Justice Thomas is a tremendous individual. So thankful for him. We had McDonald and Heller, both
Heller,
in 2008. Those were huge. And then Bruin, which provided some even more protections to it, and is specifically written for the Ninth Circuit. But that's the first federal Firearms Act was in 1934. But at the state level, gun control had been rooted in racism since the end of the War of Northern Aggression.
Now,
Upson County.
for those people who don't know what this boy's talking about, some of these Southerners call the American Civil War, which others call the war between the states. Some of them call it the War of Northern Aggression, because of obviously the South wanted to secede, and the state governments did secede. That's why they call it a war between the states. But then the northern states invaded the South in order to suppress what was not really a revolution, but it was a secession. So, right, Elliott?
Sounds aggressive to me. I mean, you're right, sir.
Well, that oddly enough, there was nothing in the American Constitution that said a state could not secede from the Union, and so they never, after the war, no secessionists were ever tried for treason,
because it's not treason at that point.
Well, I think all the lawyers and even the Yankee lawyers understood that they couldn't get a conviction under the law because it was not treason. But boy, you'll hear these. I have people up north now that still think it was treason.
Mm-hmm.
But that's life.
And unfortunately, it gets wrapped up in the politics of racism, the myth of the lost cause, but bring it back. Sorry, in Upson County, home of Camp Thunder, there was a local ordinance. That no man could possess a revolver unless it was manufactured by Colt or Remington. Okay, on the surface, that's like is that a safety thing? Just high quality revolvers? No. A Colt or a Remington revolver back then cost $25 to $30 via mail order. There ain't no way an illiterate former slave who's sharecropping can cough up that money for a revolver to protect himself from the fellas in the sheets. And that is a prime example of all gun control is rooted in racism.
Well, it's also rooted in government control. For example,
lobbyists
and free. You always think if you can't be armed, then you're a subject, not a citizen. That's the way we Americans look at it. Mm-hmm. Now, you know what? One thing that was very interesting to me was how the Australians disarmed themselves. About 20 years ago, they basically outlawed all semi-automatic guns, and you couldn't just. Friends of mine had Australian cousins who would have sent the guns to them, like M1s and things like that, and the Australian government wouldn't let them do that. They just had to grind them all up, and it's amazing. And then of course the Australian government was one of the worst when we had the COVID problem, in terms of oppression of their people. So,
status on a state.
Obedience.
Well, and that okay, bringing it back. Duly contrived authority. Yeah.
Do what?
Well, I said bringing it back to obedience. Duly constituted authority. Uh, I'm fortunate that I've never been in a situation where I've had to enforce a law that at the heart of it was unconstitutional. And I'm thankful for that. Uh, so it is a definite, it is a hard line to walk with slippery slopes on both sides of it. And heck, we can bring this back to scouting too. That is why we need programs like that to give kids, boys and girls, the ability to reason through those kinds of decisions.
Well, that's why when I sit there and Baden Powell will talk to him about marksmanship and and how you might have to do this, but then that also involves citizenship in the nation. Because that's where scouting needs to get very serious. I was at Walker. I was at camp as in my function as a lawyer, lecturing some boys about uh, uh, citizenship in the nation, and their fathers and mothers were around. It was a small group at winter camp, and I was talking about how, look, I'm old, but you guys, if y'all aren't careful, y'all are going to grow up as slaves because the constant pressure is to take away your freedoms and disarm you and everything else, and you need to understand what's going on. And also they need to understand, children and all people need to understand how tyrants can take over through the voting systems. And we kind of dodged a few bullets on that in the last couple of 3 years, it seems like. So I'm gonna set you both off on that, I bet, huh?
uh, that my 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 least favorite phrase is when somebody says there ought to be a law, and I'm like, no, because if there's a law, that means it has to be enforced by some guy like me with a badge and a gun, and we've already got enough of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, that's one thing that's interesting about people who talk about taxation, and they say, well, we need a fair tax, and we need to take the taxes that we raise, and the government's got all this money, and they ought to give it to the charities that I like, which might be dogs or old people or whatever it is. But they're ignoring the fact that taxes ultimately have to be enforced. And if a person says that he's not going to pay his taxes on his land, and then the government sells off his land at a tax sale, and then the buyer, the man that originally owned the land wants to resist the government's giving that land to somebody else, then that's when the police come in. So it's kind of like a necessary evil, but it's something that we all need to be real careful about how much uh, authority we give the government, and how much we tell the government to take from people. I'm looking at that Mandami guy that was just elected in New York, and you know there are going to be a lot of people that's going to leave that town rather than get robbed. I mean, and robbed by the government.
Yeah,
It's crazy that in the United States, nobody's allowed to come to your door with guns and demand that you give them money, except for the United States government.
Or the state and local government. I mean,
Right.
they'll do
State
it
and
too.
local too. Yeah, true.
Yeah,
yeah.
they'll do it too.
Oh man, and that's why we need. That's why a time or a program like scouting is important to show young people, boys and girls both, and their parents alike, that there can be a good way to do things and a bad way to do things, and if we stick to our guns, remain trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent, we stick to our guns, and the world may be a better place if we fill it up with first class scouts. We'll have a whole bunch of first class citizens who then will be the ones making or deleting laws, whichever needs to happen, whatever time.
Boys and girls, first class citizens.
First
That's
class.
right.
That's right.
That's right.
That
Mack,
is,
have you been in scouting since the advent of girls being bound into the troops, and I mean bound into scouting?
I was not, I've not. Actually, I left right before they rolled that out, but I am proud to say that I spent a week, 2 weeks, I don't know, at Camp Burt Adams, pounding out some of the logistics of how that program was going to work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already on my way out. It wasn't anything to do with that. But no, I am. It needed to happen. We knew there were going to be issues going into it, but I think out of everything the Scouts have done, the rollout of integrating the program has been absolutely amazing.
And let's not forget to mention though during the camp staff time, as program specialist or whatever the card may have said, there was females very active in the staff, and so any
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
problems that may be
Yeah.
faced by the older scouts that are girls, these bridges have been crossed. These things have already been, all the things that anyone might be worried about. These things have been hashed out for several years already.
Yes.
Mhm.
Mac, was Chuck Brassfield in charge when you were there?
Yes.
Did
Yes.
did you see our last podcast where he came on?
No, I didn't. But that is I did not see that. That is great though. And my fun Chuck story is 2008 when he first got hired as the exec. He came to an OA weekend at camp, and I looked at my buddy Andrew Yeomans, who was my program director for a little while at camp, and I said, "I guy's going to be chief scout executive one day," and kind of right.
Well, I was talking the other night. I was bragging on him to our listeners how when he got down there, remember how he would say, now he ask those Scoutmaster dinners where Baden Powell would show up. You remember those? And he'd say, and he'd have a chart and say, what's going on good? I mean, what do you don't like? And then he would address those things. He would they complain about some aspect, and he would get a staff member to go deal with it right away. I mean, I thought his approach, his hands-on approach, and his devotion to duty was terrific when he was there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I like Chuck a lot. He's the one that made me a for real employee, full time benefits, all that good stuff.
Yep.
So I very and he was the guy Flint River needed at the right time.
Yep.
He yes. The Scoutmaster dinners though, Mr. Walker, not gonna lie, a lot of times after that, there were very strenuous, one-sided conversations from Chuck towards me, going back to the obedience thing, where I just said a lot of, yes, sir, we'll get on that right away. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Not again. Sorry.
Well, I remember, you while you're here, Mac, I think you were in your Scoutmaster was one. You had Luke Thompson, didn't you? Was he
No,
your scout?
no, Luke Ellington.
Luke Ellington, I meant.
Yeah.
And Luke was just he was just what's the word? A classic Scoutmaster.
Yes, sir.
Gosh, just tell it for our listeners here who say, well, what is a classic Scoutmaster like? Tell about a little bit about Luke, just so we can all brag about him here.
So Mr. Luke was the longtime Scoutmaster for Troop 25 in Thomaston, Georgia. And Troop 25, we got a little bit of beef with Troop 4 up in Griffin. We've been chartered longer. I don't care what their T-shirts say. Just but Mr. Luke, he was an Eagle Scout, Vigil Award member, Silver Beaver, worked at summer camp forever too, fought in Vietnam, long Air Force career. But when I was a when I was a kid, I thought he was the laziest fella I'd ever met because we'd be sitting up camp, and Mr. Luke knew how to do all this because he had showed us how to do it all. And we're struggling there trying to get the water bag hung or the bear bag, and Mr. Luke's sitting there in his camp chair. You might want to put that dining fly a little further up the hill so the water doesn't pool when it rains tonight. Just little bits of wisdom like that in retrospect, I realized he was teaching us the outdoor method, but long before Edge was ever a thing. I still can't quite remember those principles. But he was letting us do it ourselves to learn how to be comfortable in the woods where things are uncomfortable. Uh, and that was just so. Uh, I was very fortunate to have him as a scoutmaster. And like I say, one of my best friends is his son. Uh, and we were we were not quite boy run in the sense that the PLC did everything. Mr. Luke had a plan to get you to Eagle if that's what you wanted to do. But we were boy run in the sense that when we went on our weekend camp out, you better have a KP schedule drawn up with a cook patrol, or you weren't going to eat. uh, and just things like that. And church, we were chartered by the First United Methodist Church in Thomaston, Georgia. And so every Sunday morning after we broke camp, we had a Vesper service. Just the rigidity of that. A scout is reverent, and we're obedient to our chartered organization and their hopes and desires. And just these things, I was flabbergasted my first summer as a camp staffer when they were trying to find somebody to teach the Pioneer and Merit Badge. And there was a guy who's an Eagle Scout. And he's like, well, I can't do it. I don't know the lashings. And I just couldn't, I couldn't, that did not compute. That just could not comprehend that. I'm like, did you not have a first class camp out? Did y'all not have to build an archway to your campsite at summer camp?
How did you get here?
Yeah, like just the sheer, how old are you an Eagle Scout? And all of that is because Mr. Luke, he is Fred McMurray and Follow Me Boys. He is the Norman Rockwell poster with all the ribbons on his shirt. He never wears his knots on his shirt, but when he does, he's got all the important ones. Just I'm very fortunate that he was my scoutmaster.
I remember that troop. That troop used to have. They would wear campaign hats. And,
Yes, sir.
And I believe, and it got to be where campaign hats were so expensive that scouts just gave them up. And it's kind of a shame because when they were originally adopted, they were called something like the boss of the plains, and it just happened to be BP, and BP liked those kind of hats. They were Stetson American hats, and but I remember that particular troop, the hats would get handed down from boy to boy, and no matter how ratty looking they were scout hats, and the boys were very proud of the rattiness of them almost.
And I did not hand mine down because I went to work at camp. So I kept it the entire time I worked for the Scouts. And a gentleman who was highly involved with Wood Badge got very ill at the raggedness of my hat and the fact that I was actually wearing it in the field because it's a good hat. It keeps the sun out of your eyes. It keeps the rain from going down the back of your shirt.
Yeah.
So we were very fond of we wore them everywhere but church. That was Mr. Luke's rule. We wore them everywhere but church. And we wore ball caps to Philmont. That was our other, we had ball caps that we wore on the trail at Philmont. We left all our campaign hats in the bus.
We had Trisha Bethel Suko on here, and she had just gotten back from Philmont this last summer. So we had a program talking about that, and Elliott went up to the Northern Tier on training type camp, and so that's one thing we keep kind of coming back to time after time is about how the and Chuck talked about it last week, how the Americans have these great camps, and that are just here, and people from all over the world can enjoy them. And I remember my best friend in Sweden. He worked at Camp Burt Adams with me in the summer of '67, and his son worked at Camp Thunder in the '90s for a summer, and then his granddaughter came to the World Jamboree up at Bechtel. So that's just a thing that I like to always mention is how
Let
Philmont.
me,
You go ahead.
Mac, how many high adventure bases did you visit during your time in scouting?
Only one.
Just
Uh, uh,
Philmont?
just did Philmont. Bechtel wasn't a thing when I was a scout.
Mhm.
Uh, was supposed to go. Was looking to go. We were looking at going to Northern Tier. But between college, it never shook out.
Mhm.
And don't let my wife Jackie hear this, but if they would have gave me a camp director job down at Sea Base, we'd probably still be in the Scouts. But that's
Mhm.
neither here nor there.
Well,
I would.
that
I'd love to go to sea
Uh,
base sometime. Philmont doesn't really interest me that much because sounds like an awful lot of walking. But
It's the
oh,
mountaintop of scouting. It is
I'm,
the mountaintop
that's
of
right.
scouting.
well, that's till they made Summit.
Uh,
That's pretty good though. Hey, that was a good play on words.
oh,
Oh,
that was,
Yeah.
or something.
yeah, well,
Summit's the top of a mountain. Anyways,
well, they couldn't rebuild Iraq, but KBR sure as heck built us a nice base in Virginia.
Yeah. Who's
well,
Uh,
KBR? What's that?
Kellogg Brown and Root, they were a big defense contractor,
Uh-huh.
and they did a lot in post invasion Iraq. And the Bechtel family is on their board of directors or something.
Yeah.
Uh, but so there's a little bit of intertwine there. But
mhm.
Well, the Secretary of Defense, I forget what his name was, but there's a building there named for him, the guy that was.
yes, yes, cause he had been on the board of directors for KBR before he
Yeah.
became SecDef.
Yeah. And so Bechtel's it's a heck of a place. And I said this to Chuck last week is when I went to the World Jamboree, I was so impressed how the Americans have just got logistics down pat. Boy, they're great. The organization of it is just terrific, and the quality of everything was. They have a regular water system, but they've also got a secondary potable water system that the oh, what's the name of those waterback things that you have? You know,
Camelback.
Camelback made a system that goes all around the camp, and there are these places where you can fill up your water bottles, and they have like 12 spigots around them, and they're all pressure, so you fill them up, and so because you want everybody drinking a lot of water, and so they had a whole system of that, and they had of course, a big hospital, a temporary hospital, and they had 5 Olympic size swimming pools that were like 5 feet deep where you could do swimming, just goof off. They had scuba diving there. I mean, it was great. I was amazed. And rifle shooting.
Yes.
I've really, our weekly episodes here, I thoroughly enjoy being made super jealous by Walker.
Why?
I don't know.
You
It's weekly fun now.
you've been to the Northern Tier and I haven't. I've not been to
Yeah.
the Philmont. You know,
That's
I
right.
did go. I did go hiking once in Lapland with my Swedish scout, the guy that I met at the World Jamboree, and we hiked over these what they call the high mountains there, but they're not like the Rockies. But
That's so
where
funny. We can convince these parents to put their kids in scouting and send them to camp, and they can be lifelong scouters like you, like myself, like Mac, and
Mhm.
still they won't even touch the surface of everything that's available to scouting America and scouting around the world.
Oh,
And I think
that's right.
that's something to be excited about. That I still have many more years ahead of me in the program with my children, and even if they get out like my dad, I'll continue to do things like my dad's continued to do things, even after I was out of the troop, even after my brother was out of the troop, and still we're only scratching the surface about the opportunities available in scouting. I think that in all is what we need to pass on to these parents and pass on to the young scouts who don't know what's in store for them and still will may not even be able to grasp all of it because there's so much. You read about some of the kids. I've seen some videos about some kids that want to earn all the merit badges. You've seen those. We know some of those kids that have earned as many as they possibly could throughout. And even then, they didn't touch the surface of everything that's available in scouting. I think that's one of the more important, one of the most beautiful things about the program.
Well,
So,
that makes me wonder though, if you took one of those kids that had 120 merit badges or something, and you got him out there and said, let's make a tower, a lashed tower," and
hmm
I'm wondering if he or she knew enough about pioneering to make a tower.
well, therein lies my point. Maybe not.
we, I remember we had with these scout shows up in Atlanta, and our troop every year would make a signal tower.
hmm
So we did all that lashing. It was a 20-foot or 30-foot tower, or whatever it was,
hmm
but it would stand up.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
might be a little squeaky.
no, a little
Just kidding, just
squeaky.
kidding, just kidding.
Yeah,
I never did build a signal tower with my troop, but I did so for pioneering at Camp Thunder
yeah.
several times out of bamboo. Didn't want to get on those ones.
No. Well, when I went to Sweden the first time, I went to a week long summer camp that the council up in northern Sweden had, and I helped them build a rope bridge. You remember, I had the single rope bridge with the two on the sides, and
Mm-hmm.
they got a big thrill out of that, and we had a good time. And that was one where there was a girl troop or two there,
Mm-hmm.
and but it was just great. Uh, and that's the whole thing about making friends and keeping those friends is just wonderful.
That is something. The friends I made in scouting, I'm still very close with today, Elliott included. Uh, but it made me feel so good. Recently, one of the summer camp girls got married, and my wife and I attended, and we were on the older side of the group there. But there was another group of summer camp staffers there sitting at a table, enjoying some adult beverages, and it just in that minute I realized that it wasn't just that my group of guys that I was a junior staff with. It was everybody that worked there in some way or fashion, and that just made me feel so good. A scout is friendly. Well, hey, look, there it is, right there. Uh, and I was just thinking about that. It was the Harris way, Elliot.
I know, and let me add on to that, which also will bring me back to my other point that I was making. There was many scouters there at that wedding.
Yes,
I asked several of them. Because I knew all of them from one place or another because Sahara and I were in the same venture crew, but we were also spookery staffers. We were also summer camp staffers. Um, Several of those people were summer camp staffers or NYLT staffers, and some of these worlds didn't never cross over. So I was asking. There was one of my friends. His name was Ramin. He was in my home troop and a summer camp staffer. And then our friend John Malnorich, who's also a summer camp staffer. I said, Ramin, I know that we were in scouts together, and John, I know we were on staff together, and I'm just now realizing both of you are Eagle Scouts, and I don't think either one of you know each other. And our base camp was camp, and Ramin said, "No, John, nice to meet you. My name's Ramin," and it was like, isn't that crazy?
yes,
We're all involved in scouting and had been for so long, but even then, those worlds didn't cross over, which is,
yeah.
I think there. There's so much. There's so
There's
many facets to this. There's so many angles to it, and there's so much to learn and so many people to meet. So another reason you should get your kids involved in scouting is because it expands their world in so many different ways.
and then they can go to the trading post
Mhm.
and see the pretty girl like Sahara there and buy a T-shirt.
Mhm. That's
So
right.
that was a strategic camp director decision. I stand by it. I know what I was doing.
Put
And
the
I
ice
stand
cream
by it
by
to
the
this
door.
day.
Yeah, put the ice cream by the door.
Yep.
Good times. Good times. And game night in the trading post is pretty spectacular too. That's gonna sell soda pops for sure.
Hey, a scout is thrifty, and
Yeah,
I have to be a
makes
good
its own
steward.
way.
I remember when I was at Camp Burt Adams, the camp had a rule, and that was that if if you saw a scout drop a candy bar wrapper, you could pick it up and he owed you a candy bar of that kind right then and there. I mean, it was, and
Wow.
that's one. I mean, that was awesome. But I haven't noticed Camp Thunder ever having a trash problem at all. But it's still it's. I remember I heard about a guy who was with his scoutmaster, and they're riding along out in Texas, and one of the guys threw a Coke bottle out the window after he'd finished it, and the cop and the scoutmaster stopped the car, and in the middle of the night they all had to get out and go find that Coke bottle.
Oh my gosh.
So when I was going to summer camp, when I was a camper, it was, and I would never do this simply because that trading post can provide a lot of programming supplies, but they would shut down the canteen. No snacks, no drinks, no nothing if the trash problem got too bad.
Mhm.
Ah,
That was that first summer where I was not having a good time. Miss Norma hopped up on the hearth and just yelled at the whole camp. Now, granted, it was a lot small. It was probably 200 kids per week that time, and I was just frightened. I was not straight up not having a good time. Uh, and it didn't help that I misplaced my wallet in the jumbled mess that was the Foot Locker, so I couldn't buy anything anyway. It was, ooh,
And,
it was
and, and it doesn't help that Miss Norma was terrifying if she was upset.
yeah. So I think Walker, that's why we don't have a trash problem. It's just some cultural it is a cultural thing at this point.
Yeah, which
well,
is
we
good.
and we started something in Pike County called PUP. It's Pick Up Pike, and we just decided if people wait for the government to send a crew out to pick up trash, it ain't going to happen, or it's going to take forever. So our deal was just go out and pick it up. Get your family, get your kids, go out there and pick up a quarter mile of it on both sides of the road and near your house, and do it, twice a year. And if everybody does that, it just makes a lot of difference.
Or at
You know,
least one person in every quarter mile.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember one day I was picking up trash and just hating the kind of people that throw trash out. And then I said, what would Joel Osteen say about this situation? And it came to me, and he'd have said, every time you pick up a piece of trash, you should thank God that you're the kind that you were raised to be a person that picks up trash and not in a family that threw trash out. I mean, isn't that the truth? As you ever, I mean, that's an epiphany right there. It's like, oh, thank you, Lord, that I'm not that kind of person.
That's
You
a
know,
good way to look at it. That'll
yeah,
keep me from being upset,
yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
And you'd see those little liquor bottles, those little tiny liquor bottles that people would buy because they were alcoholics and they couldn't make it all the way home without just some whiskey, or vodka or something, and they'd throw out that little airline type bottle. And
Mm-hmm.
thank God I'm not an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
It's, uh, I mean, I even found a crack pipe out there one time that somebody had thrown out. Obviously, he was paranoid. He thought the police would stop him and catch it. Just thank you, Lord.
Thank God you don't have to deal
Yeah.
with that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. It's just so obedience.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a law against littering, but it helps. So, I heard about a friend of mine was the judge up in the magistrate judge up in Spalding County, and some people were driving down the road throwing trash out, as they ate their fast food thing, and they were throwing stuff out. And the guy behind them was a county agent of some kind or a deputy or something. So he stops them and he tickets them. And they came into court mad as hell, saying, "We weren't littering. We were just throwing our stuff out that after we ate it." I mean, isn't that amazing that somebody could think they weren't littering?
Yeah,
Ignorance is no excuse for the law there, is it?
Well, or being trashiness. It's just,
Just craziness. Well, just
yeah.
not knowing that's what that means. You're like, yeah, that's the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the littering part.
Yeah. I've noticed, Mac, you're down there. I imagine you in Jacksonville, if you're going to be on the police down there, there are going to be some neighborhoods that are pretty trashy looking. And it's always been my observation that a neighborhood that'll pick up its trash is going to have less crime.
yes.
Because it doesn't, people aren't depressed by.
And if you care about yourself, you'll care about others. And people that care about others don't rob their neighbors for meth money.
These are fantastic points.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Chris Rock, and
Oh, great.
some of his jokes, and about having bad neighbors, And he said,
I had a great, and Elliott, this ties into obedience. I had a case. We picked this lady up for felony shoplifting from Walmart, and then got her for obstruction too. And the DA wanted to look at it because the magistrate had thrown out the obstruction. Just that was the kind of magistrate he was. He would just throw out obstruction on principle. But anyway, on my body cam, I've given her a lawful command of, "Ma'am, turn around and put your hands behind your back." And she's walking away from me saying, "I'm complying. You can't arrest me. I'm complying. You can't arrest me." And it was just one of those, "Ma'am, I don't quite think you know what complying means."
You're saying that word a lot, but you're not doing it.
And that was, so the DA picked that one up. And that was very low level. I mean, it was felony shoplifting, but only because she had done it so many times that she had stolen a felony amount. But that was so intimately frustrating. She had obviously not been a scout.
We had when for a while I was a public defender, and some woman had been caught. Gosh, maybe it was her 40th time shoplifting, and so our office investigator walked it was in the jail, and he says, "Mary, you've eaten your last Happy Meal." I mean, she was, we don't, in our circuit, we didn't put up with that stuff. In the Griffin circuit, people didn't have 40 arrests and 40 convictions. I mean, I remember when I came along, burglary always got time. It didn't matter. I mean, if it was a household residential burglary, you always got 10 years, serve 1, serve 3, or something like that. They just didn't put up with it. And, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, obey the law, obey what was you said constitution or constituted authority?
Duly constituted authority.
Duly constituted authority.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's important. And if you put your kid in scouts, there's a really high chance that they will learn the values of obeying your duly constituted leaders.
Yeah, your patrol leader.
Your patrol leaders. And
Your
they'll
senior
probably they may even have the opportunity to become those duly constituted.
That's right. Senior patrol leader,
patrol leaders,
assistant patrol leader,
and they may even have a chance to train the people that become those senior patrol leaders.
That's right.
If you keep them in, and they may have an opportunity to lead in the United States military in some capacity. They may be a police officer, or something like that. And obedience is not, it sounds negative to, if you like to break the rules a little bit, if you like to be bad sometimes, it sounds negative, but there's lots of positive things. It keeps the roads clean. You know?
Yep. All right, team. I think we've had a good evening here. Matt,
This,
you
this
come,
is great. Thank
when you
y'all
gonna?
for letting me participate.
Well, you check out that one with Chuck. You'll like
Yes,
it.
sir.
You
Yes,
know,
sir. Okay.
and and if there's something that you'd like for us to, if you do something that you want us to help publicize that you do, just so just get in touch with us, okay?
Yes,
And
sir. Happy to.
thank you so much, and we
It,
appreciate it.
this has been great. Thank y'all so much for having me.
All right, son. All right,
Thank y'all.
bye bye.
Bye.